First scary story. It was a dark and stormy night as the wind howled through the empty halls of the abandoned school. The windows were shattered, and the doors creaked ominously as they swung back and forth in the wind. The school had been closed for years, but rumors of strange occurrences and unexplainable events still circulated among the locals. As the rain pounded against the roof, a group of teenagers dared each other to explore the school. They had heard stories of a ghostly figure that haunted the halls and were determined to find out if it was true. As they entered the school, they were immediately struck by the eerie silence that filled the air. The only sound was the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The group split up, each taking a different corridor to explore. As they wandered through the school, they noticed that some of the classrooms were still set up as if they had been in use recently. Papers were scattered across desks, and chairs were pulled out as if students had just left. But the school had been closed for years. So who could have been using these classrooms? As they continued their exploration, they began to hear strange noises coming from the walls. It sounded like scratching and whispering. But when they tried to find the source of the sounds, they found nothing. The noises seemed to be coming from all around them. Suddenly, one of the teenagers let out a blood-curdling scream. The rest of the group ran towards the sound and found their friend lying on the ground, unconscious. They couldn't see what had caused her to fall, but they could hear something moving in the darkness. The group quickly realized that they were not alone in the school. Something was stalking them, watching their every move. They tried to leave, but all of the exits were blocked or locked. They were trapped in the school with whatever was hunting them. As they huddled together, the group began to see strange apparitions moving through the halls. Ghostly figures appeared and disappeared, and the scratching and whispering grew louder. They tried to call for help, but their phones had no signal. The night dragged on, and the group became more and more terrified. They could feel something watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. They tried to stay together, but one by one, they were picked off by the unseen force. As dawn broke, only one of the teenagers was left. She stumbled out of the school, shaken and traumatized by what she had experienced. She tried to tell the authorities what had happened, but they dismissed her story as a wild imagination. But the teenager knew what she had seen and heard. She knew that something evil lurked within the walls of that school, waiting for its next victim to come along. And she knew that she would never forget the horror she had witnessed that night. Second scary story. It was a dark and stormy night when the students of Oakwood High School began to feel a sense of unease. The halls were eerily quiet, and the air was thick with an unexplainable tension. As they made their way to their classrooms, they couldn't help but feel that something was off. It wasn't until they reached the science classroom that they realized what was happening. The room was in disarray, with tables overturned and equipment scattered across the floor. But what was even more alarming was the fact that their beloved science teacher, Mr. Johnson, was nowhere to be found. The students quickly sprang into action, searching the school for any sign of their missing teacher. But as they walked down the dark and empty hallways, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they made their way to the library, they were greeted with an unsettling sight. Books were flying off the shelves and chairs were moving on their own. The air was filled with an eerie presence that sent shivers down their spines. It wasn't until they heard a faint whisper that they realized they were not alone. "Leave this place," it said. "You do not belong here." But the students refused to back down. They knew that something sinister was at play, and they were determined to get to the bottom of it. Their investigation led them to the school mascot costume, which had been possessed by a demonic entity. The entity had been summoned by a group of misguided students who had dabbled in dark magic, and it was now seeking to possess the entire school. But the students were not afraid. They knew that they had to find a way to exorcise the demon and banish it back to its own realm. Their quest led them to a secret society of students who had been using the school as a breeding ground for their dark rituals and sacrifices. The cult worshipped a dark entity, and they had been using their power to manipulate the school and its students. The students knew that they had to expose the cult and stop their dark plans before it was too late. They banded together using their knowledge and bravery to fight against the dark forces that threatened their school. In the end, they were successful. They banished the demon back to its own realm, and they exposed the cult for what it truly was. The school was safe once again, and the students could rest easy knowing that they had saved their beloved school from the clutches of darkness. Third, scary story. It was a dark and stormy night, and the school was eerily quiet. The hallways were empty, and the only sound was the rain tapping against the windows. A group of students had stayed late to finish a project, but as they worked, they began to feel like they were being watched. They shrugged it off as their imagination and continued working. But as the night went on, strange things started to happen. Doors slammed shut on their own, and the lights flickered on and off. Footsteps could be heard in the distance, but when they investigated, no one was there. The group tried to leave, but all the exits were locked. They're trapped inside the school with no way out. As they continued to search for a way out, they discovered a secret room hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside, they found an old diary that belonged to a student who had disappeared years ago. The diary revealed that the school was built on top of an old cemetery and that strange things had been happening for years. The student who wrote the diary claimed that they had seen ghosts wandering the halls at night. Suddenly, the group heard a loud banging coming from the hallway. They cautiously approached the door and slowly opened it. To their horror, they saw a group of ghostly figures standing in front of them. The ghosts chased after the students, who ran through the school trying to find a way out. But no matter where they went, the ghosts were always one step behind them. Finally, the students made it to the roof of the school. As they looked out into the stormy night, they saw a figure standing at the edge of the roof. It was the ghost of the student who had written the diary. The ghost warned them to leave the school before it was too late and then disappeared into thin air. The group managed to escape the school and never returned again, but they could never forget the terrifying experience they had that night and always wondered if the ghosts were still haunting the school.